Try to do that. All right, so this is going to be for the bench press. We want to make sure that the patient's positioned properly. If you go ahead and put your arms up here, first thing that we should see is that the bar is going to be roughly over the chest muscles that we're going to be working. If the patient is too far down, go ahead and slide, and you go ahead and start pushing, you see that everything is going to be coming backwards, and that's not where we want our power generated. If you come back upwards and actually a little too far up, and you push, and you're going to have a little bit too much going forwards. We want to have it directly over and all the power coming straight up through. So as you push, you really don't see any wobble of this whatsoever. Okay. Another key point here is we're going to have roughly a 120-degree angle. This is going to be the strongest and safest position for doing a bench press. It's when you're doing a bench press and you've got the bar all the way down in this position that you actually have a more disadvantageous position for the AC joint. There's more chance for injury, and you just can't generate as much power as you are from this position. And when you can generate typically double the amount of power in the more extended position, you're going to get that much more of a result and stimulus to the muscle itself. Okay. Another thing that we want to really make sure of is that we don't get arching of the back. If you get the patient that really starts arching here, you're just recruiting other muscles and you're really not focusing on what we need to here. We want to protect the back, keep the core strong at all times, keep the feet flat on the ground, and just really generate and focus all of that tension and pressure coming from the muscles that it's supposed to be. All right? You'll have the patient slowly start increasing their pressure and then hit it with everything that they can so they don't have just one crazy jerky motion as they're doing that. Okay? Should feel pressure and muscular tension forming in the triceps, in the serratus anterior here, and through that pec musculature. You should be able to actually have somebody squeezing that muscle, and you can feel that muscle pushing you off a little bit, knowing that those are the actual muscles performing the exercise properly. Our next exercise is going to be the tricep press. So we'll have our individual go ahead and put your hands up on the bar. What we don't want is to be too wide, and we don't necessarily have to be all the way in, but that can work for some people. What we really want to do is to make sure that based on the body size that we can ultimately keep the elbows in. For him, if I bring his hands in too far, his elbows start to flare a little bit. That's not what we want. So I can bring his arms out just a little bit, shoulder width apart, and he's going to be able to create this the tricep press position. All right. We want to make sure that as they're warming up and giving a little bit of a push upwards on the bar, that they're really squeezing the muscle that's supposed to be intended for this particular exercise. We're not supposed to be trying to do a chest here with the pecs for more of a bench press. We're really wanting to focus on that tricep. All right. Again, similar to the bench, we don't want to be extending our back and creating a lot of potential back injury here. We don't need to be up on our feet and lifting our butt off the table. We really want to focus that as much as possible into those triceps. Okay. From a safety perspective, you don't have to worry about the bar falling on you at all. And depending on whatever's going to be most comfortable here, you have a situation where you could have a lot of wrist extension here, which isn't really ideal. You're losing strength going ultimately into the bar, and it's not really the safest position for the wrist. So if I actually bring this back, and I could even bring the thumb on the opposite side, and I've got it more on the meat of the hand, I just want to keep it from having all of that extension. Okay? So whatever's most comfortable for the individual, we want more or less lined up to go through the arm here and all be one straight piece. Absolutely avoid this rotation if possible. Okay, so that's going to be our tricep position. All right. Our next exercise is the abdominal press. I actually created this particular exercise to be biomechanically sound and to be able to train the abdominals in the way that they're meant to be without creating any injuries. So from a biomechanics standpoint, the hamstrings and glutes are meant to fire with the abdominals, okay? And in an opposite way, your erector spinae muscles are meant to fire with your quads. So it's almost this cross-patterning going on. So given that, what we want to do is have the patient pushing their feet down into the ground, squeezing their hamstrings and glutes, at the same time that we're going to be working the abs. So we'll go ahead and have almost into a bench press position, about shoulder width apart. And as they're squeezing the hamstrings and squeezing the glutes, you can feel that those are nice and strong there. Make sure that they're pushing with their abs and not using their arms for an actual motion. They're actually locking their arms out in this case. And they're almost doing a mini crunch at the same time that they're squeezing their glutes and their hamstrings again. So as he's go ahead and squeeze a little bit here, you can see that all of the power coming from here is rock hard. This is engaging with the proper piece, and you're not going to hurt your low back when you're doing this properly in this type of a position. Okay. Much safer. You're going to engage your abs much better than if you did a typical abdominal crunch, where a lot of times you'll feel it a lot higher through the abdominals. Now you're going to actually feel that all the way down to that pubic symphysis and much lower into the abs. Engage them properly, become much stronger, and again, take all that pressure off the back. So much safer positioning to have for the abdominal press like that. Yeah. So our next exercise is going to be a bicep curl. A couple of important things with the positioning of the bicep curl. You can do this in the traditional way, where you'll have the individual have a palmar grip, all right, and you want to have more or less a 90-degree angle here at the elbow. One way to maximize the amount of pressure going into the bicep curl is to actually change the hand grip a little bit, and instead of losing power because of a potentially weakened wrist joint, I'm actually going to come on the other side of the wrist and have the bar here essentially. So now I don't have to worry about any potential weaknesses or loss of force from a weak wrist and weak wrist flexors. In this case, everything is going to be focused in on his bicep at this point. So this is going to be a much better position to work the muscle that we're intending at this point. If we intend to work the wrist flexors, then we can work on those in another exercise. We're really trying to isolate the bicep in this case. All right. We want to make sure that the legs are basically straight positioning wise. We don't need to be bending over. We don't need to have extended positions with the bicep. More or less that 90-degree angle is what we're looking for. Make sure we've got enough padding here. They slowly sustain that pressure, and then they hit that max as hard as they can from that position. So the next lift that we're going to do is going to be a deadlift. And this is a very powerful lift, but it's one that you've got to be very careful that you've got proper biomechanics. There's two traditional ways that you can look at doing the deadlift and what it's supposed to be focus-wise. A lot of people see it as a very full body effect because you're going to be getting a lot of the shoulders and arms along with the legs, glutes, hamstrings, and it really ties in a lot of different pieces. You could, like somebody potentially being in a gym, if you were to kind of step forward a little bit and pretend that you have a deadlifting bar, straighten your legs all the way out, back straight, and bend over for me. All right. You're in this type of a position, you can be doing your deadlift and actually focus a lot on your glutes and your hamstrings. Okay. If you're going to be more in a position where we're at the end of the deadlifting position, which is where we've got him, this is going to be a much more powerful position. And even though we're definitely still going to have some focus on the legs, hamstrings, and glutes slightly, what we really want to try to do here is that almost like we've got a bar going right through his hips, and he's going to create more of a hinging motion here. He's not lifting with his back and straining his back muscles, but this is actually a back exercise for all intents and purposes of what we're trying to do here. So very key points. Keep the butt down, straight back, and we want to keep the shoulders upright while we're doing this, because once we start bringing our shoulders forward, all right, we're going to start recruiting a lot more of the back musculature, and that's going to be a big issue, straining the back, and that's not what we want to do for most people. Keep everything in line. Another thing that we don't want to do is have him with his chin going way up in the air. You start jamming the upper cervical spine here, that actually will shut off the glutes and potentially cause some neck injury. So we want the head looking straight forward, back straight, butt down, and holding onto the bar roughly in the same position he is here, shoulder width apart. And when we've got that lift started, he's going to be, again, trying to hinge from the back. Okay? Trying to basically stand straight up, put his head through the ceiling. Okay? This is going to be A very, very safe position for him to do that deadlift in. The further that somebody comes down and wants to recruit their hamstrings and glutes, it's a doable way to do the exercise, but you've got to specifically focus on the hamstrings and glutes and not be lifting up with the back at the same time the further that you're going to go down. That's why this position is going to be so much safer for somebody doing a deadlift and get a lot more muscle tension and power going into those muscles. All right, our next lift is going to be a shoulder shrug, really mainly focused on the upper traps, our shoulders. So as he goes ahead and locks in here, he's using the hooks, shoulder width apart again. We've got roughly shoulder width apart on his feet. We don't want any bend in the knee, all right? This isn't going to be a modified deadlift. We want to be completely straight. We want chest upright and forward, head upright and forward, and he's going to use all of his power lifting. Now, he's not going to be able to get this motion, but what he's attempting to doing is putting his shoulders up towards his ear with that type of a lift. Okay? So, again, making sure you can actually squeeze that muscle, have him squeeze it in while he's warming that up a little bit, and make sure that he's using the proper musculature when he's doing that. All right? One of my favorite exercises on this machine actually is a squat, but done with a belt. Traditionally, and especially as a chiropractor myself, if you did a squat when the bar is up on your shoulders and you start getting higher and higher amounts of weight when somebody's in this position going ahead and doing that squat, that's a tremendous amount of compression of the vertebrae and the joints. Not really excited about somebody doing that. Now, you got a couple of different things that make this so much more superior of a squat for somebody. One is going to be the fact that ultimately, because you're not trying to balance a lot of weight and deal with the potential pain on your shoulders and pain in your back, you're going to be able to get much more power and a higher amount of weight lifted with your glutes, your quads, and your hamstrings when you're doing this type of a lift. Secondly, it's just going to be a much safer biomechanically. You don't have to worry about positioning and falling over with a lot of weight or the weight coming backwards and having to deal with that and side to side. You're going to be locked into this position that's going to be very safe. And instead of actually creating compression of the spine, because of the way this is going to happen, you're actually going to create some distraction of the spine. And I've had individuals who actually say that they have a lot of low back pain and they haven't been able to squat for years, be able to do this exercise and actually hit records that they've never hit before, and at the exact same time, their back actually feels better after the lift because of the amount of decompression taking place in the spine. So it really biomechanically is a great situation. So for the individual here, we can have them doing their squat. You can go ahead and be in almost any position that you want to. Go ahead and spread your legs just all the way to the edge of the plate here. I can be super wide with this squat, or I could have them be a little bit more narrow in what their focus is going to be, all right? But ultimately, what I really want to make sure is that when they come down, start squatting for me, I don't want their knees coming tremendously forward. That puts a lot of strain on the knee, and it's not really what we're looking for. Go ahead and spread your legs a little bit wider again for me. And start doing a squat where your butt's actually starting to go backwards. Your knee more or less is staying over your toes, and you're going to get the most amount of power in your glutes and your quads where you want to, and not all of that stress and pain going on in your knees. Okay? So this is a relatively decent position for him to be in. Not the easiest position, so we want to kind of work quickly when we're here. So he's going to actually start trying to stand up, all right, and he's going to have that position. Now, because you lose a little bit with the slack here, I'm going to have him come down a little bit deeper. Get him into that position, and now when he starts doing that squat, he's going to feel the most amount of pressure where it's meant to be and not worrying about the kind of pain in his shoulders. Okay? So this is a very, very effective, very functional range of motion for a squat. You would never see somebody actually start trying to jump and they come all the way down here and all the way up trying to create that power. This is where you're going to be if you're a lineman and you're trying to get that power. If you're jumping, this is a very, very functional position for him to get that kind of the power in his gluteus maximus, his quads, and in his hamstrings here. Very, very powerful position. All right, keep the chest upright to the best of your ability. Try not to grab on if you can to the poles. Everything with this universal joint is going to be great positioning and not having to worry too much about where this is going to be. All right, our next lift that we're going to do now is going to be a calf press. There's two different ways that you can do this. Currently, my favorite way of doing this is going to be, again, with the squat belt on. And we're going to have the feet a little bit more narrow, about shoulder width apart-ish. We're going to lock that chain in, and I'll even have them come down just about an inch. Move that foot over just a little for me. All right, now you can stand back up again. And as he's coming up, he gets a little bit of slack, and he's able to go up on his toes and really hit his calves in a nice way. If I didn't come down that little extra inch and he started off in this position, by the time the slack's gone, there's not really a lot left for the calves to do at that point. So I want to try to come down just a little extra. So as he's trying to come up onto his calves, he can really feel that squeeze, and he can get the most amount of power going on throughout that musculature. And because of even how high he is now, I might even have him come down one extra loop. Let's do that. Go ahead and come down a little bit more for me. One extra loop. He gets that tension out, and as he's coming up, now he can't get his heels quite as far up off the ground, and he can get a lot of pressure going on into the calves themselves. All right. Very functional movement again. This is what we're going to be doing when we're standing up and jumping and things of that nature. So we'll get a lot more out of a lift from that position. All right, this next exercise is an exercise that I've kind of made up for the gym that was specifically geared more towards a runner, a triathlete, to try to create that power. So in this particular case, we've got a strap going around his foot. As he's trying to lift his leg, we're actually working on the tibialis anterior here. We're working on the hip flexors between the quad and working on the psoas and the abdominals. And we're going to get a transfer across here over to the arm, that cross-crawl positioning. So I'm going to go ahead and lock this in here. Go ahead and lifting up. All right, so now we've got basically our running position. He's lifting his leg. He's lifting his arm here. And we're going to be able to get that power coming all the way across. So that's going to be our lift at this point on both sides. All right. What is really helpful that I've found in this particular case is you don't want to start off with the leg with too high a flexion. There's just not enough energy, enough power left in the muscles to be able to do that. And this isn't really a very efficient or functional running position anyway. The closer that you can get to the bolt going through the bottom of this particular grasping mechanism here on the foot is really going to give you the most amount of power here. Okay, lifting up on the arm. Again, you don't want to be in that position where you're almost in a full bicep, or with your brachioradialis here doing that running position from up here. You're just not going to be able to generate the same amount of power as if you're a little bit closer towards your hip level. Okay, so this is going to be our position for our running gait. And this is just something that you can switch sides, and you can do on one side, switch, and be able to get the opposite leg and opposite arm here. Okay, very important to keep that core strong. And this is actually incredibly important, especially if you're looking at a distance runner and you might be doing these particular lifts for a longer period of time, 30 seconds, a minute, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. So much of this has to do with the mental brain control over all of these muscles firing and the pattern that they're doing here. So as the person's doing that lift, they can focus on their foot and now focus on their rectus femoris. They can focus on their abs, really squeezing from there, and then focusing on the arm and really connecting that pattern into their nervous system as much as possible is going to have dividends paid forward when they actually get out onto the road and they're running themselves. So now we're going to actually, again, from a runner standpoint and when somebody's got low back pain, and really trying to stabilize the hip and looking at that gluteus medius. One thing that you'll see a lot of runners do, especially as they become more fatigued, is their hips will start coming out to the side, and that's very specifically a gluteus medius weakness. One exercise that a lot of times they'll do, whether they're trying to do those clamshell type of a motion, or if they purposefully stick their hip out to the side, and then the exercise is to try to squeeze the gluteus medius to come upwards. All right, you're balancing out that pelvis, and that's exactly what we're going to try to do here. So I'm going to have him kick his hip out slightly, which is not firing that gluteus medius. I'm going to have the chain locked down into this position. There we go. And now, as he's trying to do the exercise, he's squeezing that gluteus medius and trying to come upright. All right, if that's not comfortable, I can also have him straddle that universal joint here. We can do the exact same thing. Bring that hip out. I can bring this in here. Get that in. And now as he's starting to come up and squeezing that gluteus medius very strongly and getting a lot of power going into that gluteus medius. This is going to help, again, stabilize the pelvis and add some endurance to that muscle, especially so that you don't, as you're fatiguing, have your biomechanics break down significantly, which will ultimately, as you kick out your hip out to the side, that's when your greater trochanter, that ball of skeleton that's sticking right out into your iliotibial band here, it's going to push right into it, and that's where what we call like a hip pointer. It gets very painful. That is specifically because of a very weak gluteus medius. If I can get him to strengthen his gluteus medius, now you don't have that hip sticking right into the iliotibial band and creating that type of a problem there. Next exercise is going to be a bent over row. So he's already in position here. What we're really going to be focusing on here is going to be the rhomboid muscles, the middle and lower trapezius muscles as he's trying to pull his elbow. Go ahead and get into position for me. What he's attempting to do is bring his elbow right up towards his side here, okay? Now, because of the position that we're in, this is going to get the most amount of power here, but if I let go for a second, go ahead and do that motion like you're going to do a full range of motion. This is what we're attempting to do as you're bringing that elbow right up towards the side. It's just that obviously we're in an isometric lift, and he's not going to be able to go through that motion. So mentally and with the imagery in your mind, that's what you're actually attempting to try to do at that point. You get a massive amount of power here, very safe, and this is going to be a really fun lift for people to be able to do, building their back strength without actually having that increased potential for any safety issues as well. All right. This is also one of the benefits to having this base being as wide as it is. It allows us for the squat and deadlift positions if you really want to have a wide squat, and it also allows the bench to actually fit on either side depending on which arm I'm trying to do this particular lift with that bent over row, and it'll fit there and create this exact biomechanics that we want to be able to see to do this lift. So again, we can, if we're creative, you can almost figure out how to isolate any muscle group that you could think of with this particular piece of equipment. All right. Just so that we can see this, got a little extra bit of chain and just a nice stainless steel grip. You can use the 1-ton hooks, you can use straps to hold into here, but this is what we've got hanging on here with some chains and some straps. Using that universal joint, there's a lot of different things that you can do with that. The next exercise we're going to look at is going to be a shoulder press, sometimes called a military press. So what we're going to do is have the individual, go ahead, Sean, you can lift your arms up like you're going to do a shoulder press here. Similar to doing our bench press, it's going to be very important to have our positioning properly here. What we really want to do is make sure that they're underneath the bar so that all of the power is going up through the bar, as opposed to if you sit a little bit too far forward and you're pushing up, you're actually going to be pushing at an angle backwards. And go ahead and go a little bit too far the opposite direction. If you're pushing upwards this way, you're kind of coming up at a forward direction. That's not really what we're looking for. So go ahead and be directly under the bar. Have slightly start pushing up. And if you don't see this in any particular direction going anywhere, you know that all that power is generating the direction that we want to. All of that power should be coming from the shoulders themselves. the upper trapezius, the deltoids, a little bit from the chest. And we want to make sure, again, that we're going to be roughly at a 120-degree angle here at the arm. This is going to make sure that we're going to get the maximum amount of power going into those muscles and be the safest position that we can at this point. We want to make sure that we keep a nice, strong core, keep the feet flat on the ground. And again, this is one that you absolutely don't want to feel like you're going to generate that last little bit of push, really extend the neck, because you absolutely constrain the neck in this position when you're pushing that hard. We want to make sure that we keep the eyes forward and the head forward so that we don't have any damage biomechanically speaking. One of the benefits of this machine is its safety level, and if you keep a few little features in mind, especially keeping the head forward, you've drastically decreased your chances of having anything negative take place when you're doing these lifts. Okay, so we'll have him go ahead and push up a little bit. He doesn't need to go all out at this point, and not a lot of motion, but a lot of power up and through here. Very key point as well. When you keep these abs strong and tight, that's going to help with the amount of compression that's going on. This is one of a couple exercises. If you're going to be doing a deadlift, you're going to have some compression on the spine. With the shoulder shrug, you've got some compression going on. All right, so this is very important here when you're going to do those type of lifts to really make sure that you're going to keep those abs strong and protecting the back as you're going to do that. Okay. Next exercise that we're going to take a look at now is going to be the lat pull down. Very much a back exercise. And one of the things that we're going to see with this, in our strongest range of motion, go ahead and put your arms up there for a second. All right. Strongest range is going to be, again, about a 120-degree angle here. And you're going to be squeezing all those muscles in the back, the lat very specifically, as you're trying to bring your elbows down towards your side. Okay? But what you'll see is when somebody's a really strong individual, they could easily lift themselves and basically do a pull-up. And that's not what we want to be able to see for somebody. We want to keep them belted into the ground, into the bench here. So as you've probably been able to see, is there's not a lot of loose anything. There's no wires. It's all a self-containing unit here. But we do have belt straps that hook in very quickly. It's got a little hook here. Hook it in that quickly on one side. I come over to the other side. Hook it in just as easily again. And you can go ahead and take those off just for a second and come on down. What we're going to do, just like any typical belt, we'll go ahead and strap that in. And then this is going to crank down, and the individual can pull that down as tight as they want it to, whatever feels good to them. And now they're not going to be doing a pull-up. You'll actually be getting the most out of that lat pull down. So go ahead and grip again for me. Start pulling down, and you can start kind of give them a feel with your fingers that they're squeezing the right muscle groups in here. All right, bringing those elbows down to the side and getting that really strong back pull. Another one of the lifts that I've really wanted to try to incorporate on this, that I think applies to all sports and is overlooked quite often, has to do with your neck strength. A lot of times you'll see martial artists, people that are boxing, people that are taking hits to the head in some way or another, really trying to build the power of their neck. But that actually will cross over into a lot of other sports. Just something as simple as a swimmer constantly turning their neck, or somebody in the aero position on a bike and they're holding their head in a particular position for extended periods of time. It's important to build the power of the neck muscles. So in this particular one, we're going to do neck as far as going into a flexed position. So I've got these standard hooks that you typically would do abdominal exercises on. The head fits in here just nicely. So I'll go ahead and strap that right into the bar. He's going to have his forehead right into the strap of that. And he's basically going to be trying to flex his head forward. He's still belted in here, so he's not going to be lifting up. Don't know if anybody's strong enough with their neck to be able to do a pull-up, but you don't want to lift your body up off the bench while you're trying to do this particular lift if your neck muscles happen to be that strong. So he'll go ahead and he'll just give a nice strong squeeze, focus as much as he can on these neck flexor muscles, and keeping that core again tight and being belted in. And this is going to be the position that we're going to want to look at for that. I know. So our next exercise is going to be for neck extension. Again, this is very, very important to have strong neck muscles when we're doing a lot of exercises. My particular purpose for wanting to do this is for triathlon and being in that arrow position, and you got to hold with those neck muscles and trying to build some endurance there. It's one of the pieces that typically will fatigue out towards the end of a long 112-mile bike ride or longer potentially, and you'll have to change your positioning because you're just really uncomfortable in your neck and shoulders potentially. So this is going to be a great exercise for that, and almost any other sport that you can think of, whether you're swimming again, you're into mixed martial arts. So again, we're going to use the same abdominal type grip here that we had, like you would be hanging from the rafters and trying to work on your abdominals here. So I'm going to strap that right into the bar. He's going to put his head in, fits nice and perfectly here. And we'll start very slow. You don't want to be jerky with these. He'll start slowly contracting those muscles as though he's trying to bring his head backwards. All right? And then when it comes time, and he's going to go all out, everything that he can in contracting those neck extensor muscles, working them in ways that most people going to the gym aren't really going to work on those muscles. A lot of times they're very overlooked, and that's unfortunate because they're so important for what we can do athletically speaking. Take that off for you. This next exercise is actually going to be very swim focused in nature with what we're going to try to do. So what we really want to do with this, we're using the wrist straps again, and I've got the chain attached here. High elbow, because when you're coming in through the wall, you want to keep that elbow high as you're coming through. You can change the positioning depending on the swimmer or how they feel like they're going to have the most amount of power. Couple of key components here. One is that when you're doing that swim, from a muscle testing perspective, internally rotating like that is largely going to be using a muscle called your subscapularis. You're going to get a lot of power there. There's no question that you're also going to be getting in a lot of that latissimus dorsi muscle as well, as you're trying to, again, becoming an internally rotating, but you're also trying to bring that arm down, and you're using your lower trap and your lat muscles while you're trying to do that at the same time. Okay? If you're a shallower swimmer, you can have that come in closer to your chest. If you're going to be a little bit deeper with your swim, especially if you're going to be a wetsuit swimmer in a triathlon, you might be going a little bit deeper into the water. You want to mimic what your actual swim stroke is going to do for you. Okay? And as you go ahead and start pushing down here, again, you want to focus on the internal rotation and bringing it down like you're trying to grab as much water as you can with your whole forearm, your wrists, and a little bit from your hand here, getting as much surface area on the water and getting that full power coming through all the way through as you get that extension down towards your side. All right. And again, you could switch this to the other side very quickly and easily and get both sides as an individual muscle from a triathlon perspective, any swimming perspective. Okay. Again, just a small piece of chain, and we've got our wrist straps that more than can handle any of the lifts that we're going to be doing with this particular machine. Okay. So now we've got the machine in a leg press position, and this is a really fun exercise because it's one of the ones that you're going to see the most amount of weight typically for most people, and it gets fun. Again, one of the things that we want to be able to see here is about a 120-degree angle to generate the most amount of power into our leg muscles and keep them safe. Another thing that we want to have into consideration is that the load cell is directly under this universal joint here on the bottom. And when we're doing a leg press, we want roughly the midfoot to be in line with this. Okay? We don't need the foot too high or too low and not be able to generate the power in the right positioning. We want the back to be flat against the back of the seat here, okay? And we do have a couple of positions for comfort for somebody, depending on where they want the pop pins for the seat position. Typically, for most people, it works really well in that 90-degree straight-up positioning here, all right? We want to make sure that the patient or individual doesn't have their hands on their knees and pushing with their hands as well, because we really want to have a good look at what's going on just with the musculature itself. All right, they can hold the bottom of the seat if they need to, hold their arms up out of the way so that they're just not generating that power from their hands. All right. Keep the core really nice and tight, and you're giving that push as hard as you can, really focusing on the quads here. All right. So our next exercise that we're going to do is going to be the calf press from a little bit different positioning in the leg press setup, more or less. So when we had the leg press with that universal joint going right into the midline of the foot, now for the calf press, what we want to do is basically get the ball of the foot in line with that universal joint. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is have the individual with their foot flat against the plate here. And what they're trying to do by using their calves is take the ball of their joint, the ball of their foot, and they're pushing forward. All right, and they'll be generating all of that power into their calf muscle. Again, staying upright, keeping the back flat against there. You don't need to push with the legs. And this is one that from lift to lift, sometimes somebody might get a little excited and put a little bit more of their quad into it and turn it into a leg press, which is why I've kind of geared a little bit more towards the belt squat position, being upright and just trying to go standing up. That way I'm not really able to use my quads as much for that type of a lift. But if the individual is really trying to be as straight and focused on that particular exercise and really isolate the gastroc and soleus muscles, from time to time you'll see that progression, and you won't see that one random time that they were up 400 or 500 pounds because they turned it into a leg press. We really want to try to keep that as individualized to those muscles as possible. So go ahead and press forward with those. All right, and you can really feel that into the calves in a very significant way. All right, this is going to be great for somebody who potentially maybe they just can't stand up very well, and you don't want to have them in that belt squat position. They can easily sit, get a leg press, move their foot down, get a calf press, build some muscle strength in their legs, and hopefully get to the point where they might be able to be ambulatory again, walking around in a much easier way, going upstairs, downstairs. This is a great starting position, especially for an elderly individual who just might not be able to get into a squat and develop that power from a squatting position. This is the way that I've traditionally done this in the office for the last 14 or 15 years now. It wasn't until just now that we've got this universal joint that we could do the belt squat anyway. So this is very reliable. You get a lot of great gains from the leg power from both of these positions with the leg press and with the calf press.